how did you discover the importance of this? Because values really come out in both of your books. I just loved them.
All of our lives we learn lessons. Sometimes we don't realize we're learning them, but we learn lessons. And what really got me going was when I was kind of early in my career. I was in my mid 20s, and I struggled with the CEO of a company that I was at, and he wanted me to be something different than what I was. And that struggle forced me to start really thinking about who was Howard? What did I really stand for and what really mattered to me? And that put me on a journey of writing down my values, about deciding how I wanted to live my life, what my mission was. And it took me a long time to do that work. It actually over a year by the time I got it really completed. And then I have tried to live by those values the rest of my life. Hardly anything has changed. That's in almost 50 years. Uh, the values that I started with are pretty much exactly the same as where I'm at today, and I'm 79 years old.
Yeah, that's incredible. And in your first book, it's not about the coffee. The first two values that you go through, one is know who you are, which is what you're talking about, but also know why you're here.
Right.
And that seems so foundational to everything that we do. What's your advice for our listeners on how they should approach coming up with these things?
Well, the first thing is to write down your values. They have to be written down, and then you have to define what they mean to you. Because of that, we say, if I said honesty, I want to be an honest person. It's actually my first core value. What does that mean to me? How does it come to life? Because it's just a word until you define it and you say, what does honesty mean to me? What would I tell a white lie about? What wouldn't I lie about? And so you have to come to grips with those things, and then you got to. I feel, and I learned that I had to have a personal mission statement. Now that has changed over time. Early on in my career, it was kind of it was I wouldn't call that it was soulful. It was something I wanted it to be, which was I want to be one of the leading people in the home furnishings industry. But when I joined Starbucks, and Starbucks did its work on its values and its mission, I kind of attached myself to that, and I completely changed my mission. And my mission today is every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. And the reason why I say self first is what I've learned in life after living this long. If you're not okay with you, it's very difficult to help somebody else. So I think those are the first two things that you do, is figuring out what your core values are, define them, and then write a personal mission statement. And that mission statement, that defines how I live my life every day. And then how I do it is according to my core values and what I call my 6 Ps. But it drives me. I look at it every day. I'm looking at it right now. It's right here on my office wall. You'd say, well, Howard, why do you need to look at it all the time? Because it's so easy to forget. It's amazing how easy it is for us to get off track as human beings. And so I'm always looking at it, making sure that I'm doing what I set out to do.
That's great. And I reflect on my alignment tools every week and have sort of deep conversations with myself about what it means to cultivate in that direction. And I remember back in the late 90s, I had a set of values. It was an aerospace company that I was building. And the top value was integrity. And I asked 10 of our, at the time, only 70 employees, how are you applying integrity to make the company measurably better? And I got 10 crazy answers. Kind of to your point, it's just a word until you figure out a way to sink your teeth into it. So we figured that out. And, every year, every employee had an example for each one of we changed them to behaviors.
Yeah.
But for each value or behavior of how they applied it to make us measurably better. And wow, did things take off. So if you could talk about how getting values right inside an organization can supercharge the financial performance, the growth, and all of that, because that's what I found. And it seems like in your book, that's a big part of what you found.
Well, I think the most important thing to have in any organization is alignment. not everybody the same on everything, but alignment against how you want to live your life inside of work, how you want to treat each other, how you want to treat the people that we serve, those human beings we call customers, how we want to do things that we do. And that alignment really drives an organization because everybody knows where the other person is at and how they will do things. And that to me is key. I mean, it was one of the great strengths of Starbucks is we had tremendous alignment on what we were about. And I coined this phrase that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee.
Your identity, I think, in a lot of ways at the time was, in a big part as a dancer, fitness instructor. I mean, this nationally recognized. How did you work through that? What was that like the first year to kind of get through that? Because that went away immediately.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it really hit me in the hospital. I was like, I think being an athlete helped me with my mindset. I think that my faith definitely played a part. I was talking to God every day. And I was just focusing on what can I do instead of what can't I do? What can I do to be the best that I can be to prepare for the surgery the next day? And I mean, when I say that, I was doing everything from like if my sugar levels got over 125, they would give me insulin shots. So I cut out all carbs, all fruit, all everything so I wouldn't have to take insulin shots. Cause that when your sugar levels are too high, it can cause infection. And I didn't want to risk infection and having an amputation. And so, it hit me though one night in the hospital. I didn't sleep because I was in so much pain. And I would also watch the clock because every 3 hours they would come and rip these bandages off my leg, was held together by these metal rods. And they would rip these bandages off and my leg was completely exposed. And I would sit there and look at the clock. And I remember there was one night I was watching this infomercial on TV and I was all by myself in the hospital. And, there was this infomercial and there was this beautiful girl running across the beach and her family chasing her, and it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, what if, my husband doesn't love me anymore? What if I can't chase after my family or my daughters? What if I can't run again? What if I can't work again? What if tomorrow they amputate my leg? What if I die? Like I was spiraling down into a depression and looked down at my leg thinking, am I ever going to be able to wear shorts again? What is going to happen? Like I've completely lost my identity. And in that moment, something that really, really helped me in that moment, and it's still something I practice every day. And I say practice because I believe that I can always improve on everything I do is gratitude. Because in that moment, I thought, wait, I can go down the road of despair and focusing on what I can't do, or I can focus on what I'm grateful for. And I just started writing everything, every nurse's name down so I wouldn't forget their name and I could thank them by name. Every single client that came to see me, every friend, flowers they brought me, food they brought me, so I could write them a thank you note. And I noticed when I started thinking about like remembering the people that I wanted to write thank you notes for, how it filled me with gratitude. And gratitude is alchemy. And it really changes what you can't do into what you can do and what you don't have into what you do have. And so that part helped me through each day in the hospital. And that was really the easy part. The hard part was when I got out of the hospital and I was diagnosed with a nerve disease called complex regional pain syndrome, which is an incurable disease. I was told, get back in my wheelchair. I would never walk again. The doctor said, you'll never work again. You're going to be permanently disabled. And I was like, that's just not the life that I think is for me. Like nothing against wheelchairs. My brother's been in a wheelchair his whole life, but that's not what I want to do. I said, all I was focused on was like, I needed my clients more than they needed me. I needed a purpose. And so I worked every single day. My first goal was to working on my mindset, but also focusing on like baby steps and setting small attainable goals. Cause I had this big vision of I was going to train my clients again. I was going to get back into fitness. It hadn't hit me that no, your life has changed. Like it really has changed. And I think we have to go through this process and we have to try. And sometimes, what I've realized is resilience doesn't mean bouncing back. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get back to what I was doing, and I was trying to fix what was broken. And sometimes instead of trying to go back or fix what's broken, we need to open our mind up to, well, what lies ahead and what else is there that we could do? What else brings us joy? But first I had to get out of that hospital bed. I was in the living room. We had a hospital bed set up in the living room. And every day I would practice standing up. And it was at first only seconds at a time. And I'd have to lay back in bed and elevate my leg to let the blood flow come back down, because the arteries and veins were so damaged. The blood would get stuck at the bottom of my leg. And little by little, I would set these small attainable goals. And I remember the first time I could walk on crutches around the block to Starbucks, and I could sit there, and the reward, how rewarding that was. That was a goal. Well, actually, to be completely transparent, my first goal was to be able to walk with crutches down the hall, around the corner to the bathroom so I could use the bathroom on my own. And that was a big deal. And I share that because if I would have focused on, I want to run a marathon again, that was too big of a goal, and I'd probably still be in a hospital bed. But I think if we set these small attainable goals and we celebrate our victories along the way, then we can achieve these things. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned is I was in denial about a lot of things. I tried to hide my scars. I tried to hide the fact that I was in pain. I tried to stuff it down. I didn't want to admit that I had a nerve disease. And what I realized is when we don't allow ourselves to feel these feelings and we stuff them down, they eventually rise to the surface and they come up in everything we do, the way we love, the way we work, the way we lead, in every single way. And instead of just kind of trying to deal with those feelings, I had to learn to heal those feelings. And that took time, and it took a while for me to accept all my scars, because I hated the way that I looked. I hated the scars. I actually went in about a year after my accident and asked the doctor, I was like, you know what, Dr. Wiss, I appreciate all you've done to save my leg and all these surgeries, but I'm in too much pain. This leg is disgusting and ugly, and I need you to amputate it. And he did something that changed everything for me. He got my leg, he sat down in front of me and he put my leg in his lap. Like usually they put your leg like on the table, and he put my leg in his lap and he looked at it like it was a masterpiece. And I thought, wow, like tears it still gets me emotional because it changed my life because of him accepting my leg and looking at it the way he did. I was like, wow, if he can do that, maybe I can learn to love my leg too.
In going through your book Prosper, I recommend everybody read it. What a great sort of foundational way to think about your life. What I find interesting when I talk to people about what it means to be successful or prosper or whatever that is, I don't think very many have thought deeply about it at all. And they're kind of doing what they think they should do instead of maybe what they were meant to do and how to go through it. But what are you finding there in general when you start working with folks? Have they thought very deeply about, and then I want to get to the, what your answer of what prosperity really means, but if they thought very deeply about it on average when you meet with folks?
Yeah, it's interesting when Ethan and I wanted to write the book, we had, a bunch of employees, we were helping other people launch their books. We had, we were helping authors get their messages out to the world with our company. And I remember one of the guys that we were helping do it with, he's like, dude, you've helped so many other people become New York Times bestsellers. Why don't you do it yourself? And, again, he threw down the gauntlet, and Ethan and I were just like, you know what? Let's do it. And I remember, what would a topic that I would love to share with the world for the rest of my life? Because once you write a book out there and you get it out there, it's like, what would you feel good about your grandkids and your great grandkids and everybody reading? And so we really came up with what's most important with us is ensuring that we're living a life of prosperity, which means for us, after thousands of surveys and everything else, we ask everybody, what does it mean to you to be prosperous? And it was interesting. Everything that we got back, we found that prosperity, living in a zone of prosperity, was actually very multidimensional. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about happiness. It was more really multidimensional, where it was actually a really good balance between money, happiness, and sustainability. So it had to have those three elements in it to really have prosperity. Because a lot of people are like, we all know a lot of people that have a lot of money, but they are miserable and not in a good space. We all know those people that are super, super happy and excited to have amazing families in life, but they don't have enough money and they're stressed because they can't pay their medical bills or whatever that may be. So we don't feel like that's living in a state of prosperity. That's just living in a state of happiness. And the other thing was the sustainability piece, is that it had to be something that you could do for the long run and that was good for others, that you weren't taking advantage of your brother. You weren't taking advantage of your neighbor, that what you were actually doing with your life was meaningful and significant. And so that was that sustainability piece. So really a state of prosperity is like, money is so important to be able to make it, to be able to learn your economic engine. And then the second part was, do you love what you're doing and can you do it over the long run? And is it sustainable over the long period of time? So for us, that was kind of the three-legged stool of prosperity, was those things.
Okay. And it seems like you're helping people be more intentional in how they think about this. Whereas up until this point, maybe they wanted it but didn't know how to think about it. Is that what you're finding when you work with folks?
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%. The intentionality about living a prosperous life, and really the subtitles, create the life you really want. And Arthur Brooks has written a new book called Build the Life You Want. Him and Oprah Winfrey just launched it. And it's really all of the studies around happiness, which is a lot of the studies we did, is like, how do you get to that space where you have, just really joy in your heart and you want to do things, even though the struggle's hard. It's really understanding that. But if you combine what your core competencies are with the ability to make revenue and build a company or, consult or teach or write or, be a fly fisherman or whatever that is, like if you really love it, you're going to do it. You're going to do it excellent. And so it's really learning how to live a state of prosperity is living in a state of excellence across those three mediums for us.
Okay. And when I'm listening to this, it really ties into what I advocate for, which is creating value in the world. And if you're not creating value in the world, it probably doesn't feel right going through your process that you're talking about here. And of course, I had to do some of the exercises, so I wrote down, what is prosperity to me? And maybe it's a little unfair because I think deeply about this stuff all the time, but I wrote, being on a path that continually increases my internal level of fulfillment. And there's a lot that goes into that to make it happen. I've got a number of things that I cultivate, but that's how I thought about it. Does that directionally kind of fit with what you're talking about here?
Yeah. 100%. And then what is that path? What are those things? What is your, like if you lead, like I love you because you do a lot of strategy. Now think about that as your, strategic objective. Now, what are the 5 critical things that you need to do to fulfill that, to hit your Polaris point?
So I want to get into the Polaris point here. I did a lot of the exercises, but on that one, my Polaris point on the value side, which is where it kind of started in your book, three things that I really value: elevating human consciousness, starting with my own, health, and fulfillment. So I look at that, and I do this by connecting culture to holistic value creation within organizations of any type or size, communities, even at the individual level. And that feels really good, because the more of that I do, selfishly, it creates a better world for guys like you and I and my family and friends to interact with going forward.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect example. And Lee, I know your work and I know what you do, and you love people. Like what you're doing now, even with me, is like, you love to serve and you love to help other people accomplish their goals. And in so doing that, it actually is fulfilling for you.
Oh, 100%. And selfishly, again, it makes the world a better place for us to interact with. So when people talk about being selfless or, anything about altruism, it never makes sense to me, because we all do what's in our best self-interest for this life or the next. And so by definition, we're selfish. And if I feel good doing something, then selfishly, I want to feel good going through. Getting the 6 prosperity practices. So when you go through the book, these are the things, after thousands of surveys and working with, thousands of leaders, that you landed on. The first one, which is a foundation for all of it, finding your Polaris point. So talk about why that's so important and a little bit about what goes into that for our listeners.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting as you look at, like, if you look at finding your Polaris point, is really seeking clarity on your life. Being prosperous to us means you have a life worth living. It means your internal and external worlds are congruent. It means you have deep, loving relationships, and that drives our happiness. Most of our joys and most of our sorrows will come within the walls of our own homes and with the partnerships we have. Right? So that's actually a big part of it. It means you're making the world a better place and helping others prosper as well. And that comes back to you. Lee, you and I are very similar. Like my father's told me when I was coming, down the stairs, heading to college, my first year, I'd just come back from a 2-year mission in the Philippines. And my father grabbed my face and he said, Randy, I want you to remember one thing that's going to help you have so much success in your life is to learn to do as much as you can, as often as you can, for as many people as you can, and expect nothing in return. And I wrote that down in my journal, and then I just tried to internalize that. And really what he was teaching me is that law of reciprocity. And so for me, my Polaris point is mankind. I love helping as many people as I can. Lee, you and I are very similar because I've kept to that mantra. It's like, how many people can I help raise up? My whole thing in life is leadership. And if I can help groups and organizations and teams be better leaders, dude, that makes me so freaking extremely just pumped when I see a company that we can turn around from doing $1 million in revenue to over $100 million in less than 18 months, right? Because they all get aligned. Like, that is my Polaris point. Like, my Polaris point is helping other people be the best versions of themselves. That's what I found that I love. But my brother Marty, he's an engineer, and he loves to build and create software and technology and apps and learning and training modules and all of that. Doesn't deal with people as much, but he deals with systems and processes. So I think finding your Polaris point is like, what were you born to do? What did God create you to do? What was your one thing that you're going to do that's going to create value for the world? And that could, again, be writing books or building a company or, building an orphanage and a charity. And it doesn't always need to be living in a state of prosperity. It just means you have enough money to do what you need to do. Doesn't mean that you're going to be uber wealthy. It's just that you're living in the state where you have all your needs met.
Kind of starting at the startup. I like it when it's a mess, because that's the highest leadership work we can do. And that's why we're here. And that's what leaders should embrace, not act like victims when the world isn't perfect. But what do you think the biggest, I have my thoughts, but the biggest miss in startups that fail? Like, what do you think the biggest?
Yeah, well, there's multiple, but as soon as you ask me that, one came to mind right away. It's an unhealthy dependence on funding to solve all their problems. So I always have to tell people this, that the most valuable resource in the world is not financial capital, it's human capital. It's not a funding game, it's a talent game. And I see these companies, startups specifically, that a lot of times they'll tell me, when they fail, I say, why did you fail? They say, I ran out of money. I said, that's not why you failed. You failed because you failed to innovate, to do anything creative, right? To actually create value. That's why you ran out of money, not the other way around. And so I likewise see the other. I see people that are kind of seem to be sitting there and they're like, I'm like, when are you going to actually go out and create value? They say, as soon as we get funding. And the truth is that if you give a lot of money to a group of average people, nothing happens. What happens is December comes, all the money's gone, and they ask for more, and the investor says, you didn't do much with the money this year. They were never going to. They were average people. Rock stars, when you give a little money to rock stars, you come back and you're like, wait a minute, I only gave you this much. How did you do all that stuff? So focusing, I frequently see them using on funding and money as a crutch. We can't get it done. We don't have enough money. Instead of focusing on rock star talent. What I remember walking, these were in the early Priceline days. I remember walking down the hall at Priceline, looking at the people that we all had assembled there and thinking, man, if we were in a different industry, we would probably still win. This is an incredibly talented group of people. So that's a big one for me that I see all the time. All they're talking about is funding. And then I meet some of the people that they've accumulated. And I was like, this group, there's no rock star in here. There's no innovator. No one's thinking outside of the box. You're just using funding as a crutch for not being able to get things done. And when I started one of my first companies and had no money, instead of my team saying, as soon as we get funding, they would just say, hey, let's just figure out what's the most we can do without someone else's money. They were constantly innovating and creating. I had a day once when we moved to a new office, one of my first startups, before we had furniture, that when we were waiting, I said, I can't really buy furniture. I'll go try to find some used stuff. We were a brand new startup, no money. You know what they did? They took these $9 metal trash cans from Target, flipped them upside down. They got a screwdriver. They unscrewed all the doors in the office and they laid them across the trash cans and they sat on the floor and just started working. And they said, while you're out looking for furniture, we already built an office and we're already working. Innovators don't use funding as a crutch, right? They use funding as fuel. But most startups that I see tell me that we can't get it done. We can't succeed because we don't have enough money.
A lot of leaders today that I work with, something goes a little bit wrong and they act like a whiny little victim. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, why would we need a leader if the world was perfect? This is the highest level leadership work you can do, is bringing chaos together around that. Talk about that a little bit, because it's, I think it's just part of the job, and it can be a lot of fun. It doesn't have to be, you talk about negativity in the book too, but it doesn't have to be that.
That's exactly where I go with it, Lee, is that I think great leaders, especially in the chaos of startup, and how I always approached it was, it's a really sophisticated game, and you're trying to, and it can be fun. You're trying to win the game, right? Whatever, define win however you want, but like and so when you go into a day or a week that's really, really hard, yeah, of course, when you're playing a game, there are going to be those moments. And then there's going to be the victories, right, inside of a game. And so that's the mentality I still am playing the game, this game of Big B Coffee today, right? And it's so invigorating and exciting today to be playing this game. It's not as hard as it was, but in startup and that's how I never got down, like I never got exhausted. I never blamed other people. I shouldn't say I never got exhausted. I got exhausted, of course, but I never blamed other people. It was always just some part of the game that we were in the middle of playing. And I love that, and I watch people who go down these deep, dark holes of negativity. And it's like, But what did you expect? Like, of course it's going to be hard. And that's when you got to be resilient. That's when you got to really show up and that's how you win the game, is showing up in those moments and getting through it.
Why is it important to even start down this road and figure it out? Again, I don't think, to your point in the book, very many people really think about it intentionally and really work on it in a very mindful and intentional way. What would be the value if more people got on this road and went to, like, why should they even do it?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I want to say, and I say this often in my coaching practice, because people know that something's off. This is my strong belief. There's something is not right internally. And of course we could talk about the external world, but many people feel something's not right. And they can be very self-deprecatory, very self-critical about, I don't do this or something, or why am I not more mindful or something like that? I always have to remind myself and others, how could we be? We were never taught these things. These were never upheld as important in our culture, in our values or society. It's happening a little bit more now, but mind you, our early childhood minds shape what we believe is real in our life. That's what creates our systems of beliefs, of biases being mental shortcut to speed processing time, help us make decisions faster. So how would we know any other way, really, in fairness to all of us? Go over to Bhutan and people know another way, and through their whole lives they're happier. They've been taught this. It's been nurtured in them since they were tiny children. But let's come back. Why does this matter? Because it's a super important question. I was reading a book the other day that I don't fully agree with, but it was saying like everything in life is neurochemistry. So materialist neuroscience believes that it's like a machine. The computer analogy is it's a really good analogy for the brain, until you tell a materialist neuroscience or ask a materialist neuroscience, oh, that's great, makes perfect sense to me. Where's it plugged in? Every computer has to plug into some sort of power source, right? They don't like me very much when I pull that one. But yeah, right? The brain works differently in different emotional states or scenarios. So when I am feeling satisfied and fulfilled, I have a little bit more of an all systems go opportunity in my brain for it to map across, many places, many synaptic pathways and functional areas of the brain, because every part of the brain functions differently. And I am able to access more of my brain when I am in a steady state. The minute that my switch flips to time pressure, to someone looking over my shoulder, to someone telling me I did a bad job, to having ambient stress for other reasons, certain parts of the brain are limited neurochemically. It's fascinating, actually. What I speak about here is what many people title like even a mini fight or flight response. And in any sort of stress scenario associated with the fight or flight response, which is actually a little bit different than many of us have been taught, but talk for another day. The amygdala sends out chemical signals very quickly into the brain that vasoconstrict, meaning they constrict certain veins in the brain, reducing blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, which is the home of our highest human cognition. This is the place where intentional thought, values-oriented thinking, long-term, to some extent long-term. The right hemisphere also does a lot of long-term, but really like if-then scenarios, on the other hand scenarios, thinking about our impact on others. This is where we become very mindful, right, of the way we want to think in the world. This all gets cut off when we're hungry, tired, afraid, lonely, stressed. Said pretty much everybody at this time and place. I mean, we can look at many of those things almost as epidemics right now. Stress has been named by our wonderful Surgeon General as loneliness is an epidemic. Many people report stress. I'll bet there are people, it's the day before Thanksgiving holiday in the United States today, or, what we call Thanksgiving holiday. There are many people out there who are probably beeping at each other and making hand gestures, trying to get to whatever they need to go out and buy or do today, right? All of these things are part of our life, and we have to accept everything affects the brain. You read in my book, and you can tell I love this stuff. Your brain is a survival technology. It exists to keep you safe and alive. And in order to keep you safe and alive, it is going to look back on everything that has allowed you to survive through the history of your life, which it has documented with exquisite precision. And it's going to tell you, keep doing those things you've already done, because the evidence is in, you're here. This will keep you safe and alive, which is what makes change hard. Which is what makes waking up and going, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense anymore. Your brain doesn't have any evidence that new and novel thoughts or intentions or new ways of thinking will serve you staying safe and alive.
You talk about showing the value, not expecting anything in return, getting noticed, and then really great things happen from that, right?
Yeah, it's almost, I don't know if it's almost too good to be true when I tell people the story. Oh, you got lucky. Oh, that was a fluke. And I go, no, it really wasn't. You could recreate this. You could follow the same path I did, become an entrepreneur, go above and beyond. Don't look at your job as just 9 to 5. And oh my God, it's 4:59. I got to get out of here. I try and open people's minds to say, listen, look what I accomplished. And honestly, I use the analogy. You've seen these charts where it shows, Colonel Sanders started at this age, and these, people started their businesses into their 40s. I said, I tell people I didn't meet the founders of Quest till I was 46 years old. Most people's trajectory is already set. And so that was just a whole new opportunity. I just try and change people's mindsets that they're like, oh, well, you lucked out. It was timing. Sure, there's a certain amount of everything, but also the energy I brought, the frequency I was running at. I didn't have the vision board, but I just looked at, hey, every person I meet is an opportunity to do great things in life.
Yeah, I couldn't articulate it when I was a kid, but I would create value and develop people anywhere and everywhere appropriately, responsibly, any way that I could. And it just kept exposing me to more and more opportunities. And I never kept score. A lot of people keep score, even when they say they don't. It's like, there's no hidden agreements here. I'm just doing this. And then there's all these things that exposes me to that I can take advantage of, participate in, whatever I want. And that works out really well, but it's decades of that. No wonder it works out. And I've had employees, biggest company that I founded and sold, and I sold it in 2016, had a little over 500 employees. And I would do onboarding orientations. And I've had employees say, how come these things don't just happen to me? And I remember joking at one point, yeah, my 23 overnight success story. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Listen, I've always practiced since I was a kid. I made more deposits than withdrawals. And when I try, it's not everyone grasps the concept, but it comes back tenfold. But you're right. We've interviewed many people at Quest as we were growing, and they would come in with their resume, and we weren't big resume readers, to be honest with you, because listen, everyone's the number one graduate in their class, right? But I said, let's put the resume aside. Let's talk about you as a human being. And they would always come in and want to be the director of some department, and obviously starting at 150,000. And what really brought things in perspective, because they would sometimes call me into interviews and say, oh, hey, Bruce, this is so-and-so. They're applying for the director of marketing. Do you mind telling them how long did you help us for free? Oh, 9 months. Oh, did you get paid? No. And you'd almost see a little bit of the deflated ego. But when I tell people that story, they're like, well, you're an idiot. Why would you work for 9 months for free? Well, fast forward, I had equity in $1 billion company. I mean, so it doesn't always translate to people. Even when I try and break it down to them, they say, I'd rather have the money right now up front.
When I describe the primary job of a CEO, I say it's to continually and responsibly increase the value of their organization. Does that align with how you think about the primary job of a CEO?
I think it does. I would perhaps expand it a bit, and I don't think you intend it in a limited view, but in my own view, value has to be created for everybody in the equation, everybody in the ecosystem. It obviously has to be created for your customers, or they're not going to pay you, and you're not going to have a business. It has to be created, perhaps in the future, but it has to be created for your investors, because otherwise they're not going to fund you. It also has to be created for your employees and your team, all of your stakeholders. And I think it's very tempting to think about the exchange of money as value. Well, I pay you a salary. That is our value exchange. that is not what motivates people to do their best work. It is not what makes people deeply devoted to an organization. People want connection. Business is done between people, and that is a very easy thing to miss sometimes. But the human contact and the human connection and the growth opportunities that your team gets through your organization and through interactions with you as a leader, that is absolutely critical to their perception of value within the organization. If you're not doing that and you're just simply, relying on the money that you pay them and the potential equity downstream, you'll get people who work hard, but you will not get people who are devoted and waking up thinking about it at 3 a.m. and how could we make this better, and coming in at 7 o'clock at night because your website's down and getting it done. That's not how you deliver value to your employees.
One of the themes I got from the book all the way through is creating value. Like, you have to actually create value. And in my businesses, I've always thought about it as, yes, we have to create material value. It's how you value the business. But the emotional energy value, it's a superpower for leaders. It's the environment, the engaging environment. The spiritual value creation at its core is connectedness. So what are we doing to make sure, employees are connected with themselves, other team members, communities that we touch, and all of it? I think about it holistically, and the multiples have always been so much higher because of that. So this whole part of coming in and creating value, that's not the perspective of a lot of folks coming into the workforce today or in the workforce today. Talk about that a little bit and the importance of it.
Yeah, I love how you talk about this, like emotional value, spiritual value. I'm an emotional value 10 out of 10 person. Like, I really care about emotional value, which is probably why I like music, because I completely agree with you. Music and emotion are so inextricably intertwined. I think one of the hard things right now happening at work is that people aren't showing up. I think it's very cool right now to not like work. It's kind of a badge of you're on your employer, you're mediocre on your job, you're mailing it in. And of course, that's always existed at work. But it's very palpable right now. I think it's in large part driven by social media. I think it's in large part driven by remote work, which I think is pretty debilitating to creating connection, spiritual, emotional, and material, value at work. I think it's pretty debilitating. But what I think is really a shame about that, and I write about it a lot in the book, is that, I really believe work is tuition that you get paid for. And work is just a place for you to learn and experiment and try things and do things and figure out who the heck you are while getting paid to do it. And, honestly, what's better than that? It's, instead of you paying to go to school, it's somebody's paying you to learn on their dime. And what I think is really unfortunate about people holding themselves back and not showing up thinking about the value that they can create is that the only person it really shortchanges is themselves. Because your company is going to find the value, and there are going to be people who show up and want to contribute. And I think there's a little bit of, I think in 5 years, if you flash forward to the people who mailed it in all this time, and the people who really showed up trying to create value for themselves and others, it won't be comparable, the results of where those two groups are. And, I think that's really hard, because it's hard to predict that in your own life, but it's really important. And I think it's, because so much now is happening on Zoom, it's disintermediated. It takes a little bit of an extra kick now to show up and create value. I had a conversation this morning with someone who works for me, and we had an event on Friday, And this person wants to be involved in the events business. And I said, well, did you go to the event on Friday? And the person said, no, I worked from home. I didn't go into the event on Friday. And I was like, but you want to work in the events business. So if you want to work in the events business, you got to go to the events and you got to create value around the events. That's how you earn the opportunity to do more in events. And first, that you would think that's quite obvious, and it just isn't. And I think everyone, even myself, needs a reminder of things like that. But I think that's pretty prevalent.
Yeah. Well, what I hear, you have to lean in and kind of do it. You can't just sit back and get a paycheck. And it's always felt to me like a double standard. It's okay for one individual to not do what they agreed to do for what they're getting paid for. And yet when they go home, if they hired somebody to do a service, could be paint their house wrong color and half the paint falls off, they're going to be upset about it. Yeah. So wait a minute, let's be real across the board.
Exactly.
And regardless of what we're paid, let's do our best.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we're paid, we can change the environment, but why not always do our best?
Exactly. And I think, when your environment is relentless, this is another thing I write about a lot. So if you're in an environment that is just people being toxic or complaining all the time or, just, crapping on work or whatnot, it's contagious. It's going to affect you. If you're in an environment where people are mailing it in and doing a bad job painting the house or a bad job doing events or whatever it may be, that's also going to affect you. So, I think one of the biggest things now to create value is to put yourself in a situation where you're pushed to create value. And I think that's really important. Put yourself in an environment, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Put yourself in an environment where you have to stretch. And I don't think you ever regret that.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. You talk about understanding the reality in your book, understanding the realities of work and the environment that you're going to be working in. Why has everybody become such an expert on pointing out the problems everywhere, what's wrong with people and things and why stuff won't work instead of course, it's not perfect. And now I get to contribute to making it better.
Yeah. It's funny because I always liked a lot of problems at work because I felt like it was job security for me, right? I felt like, if there's a lot of problems here, that means there's people who are dumber than me who work here. And also I won't be out of a job because there's a lot to work on and fix. And I think now one of the things that happens a lot at work is, people spend more time just complaining about the people of it all, versus, hey, there's a problem here. This person isn't at their operating at their best. How do we get them there? This product isn't doing what we thought it should do. How do we get it there? And just that tweak in orientation from this isn't, this shouldn't, this is bad, just the talking of it to the doing something about it. I think it can make all the difference because what you realize is if you just start doing small incremental things, you can create a lot of value and you can have a lot of impact.
Yeah, I like thinking about it as we have all these, structural functions, departments, teams within an organization. How is each one designed to create value? And then how are we measuring that? And is it driving the majority of the right behaviors? And then my next question is always, what's the best work we can do to increase the value that we're creating as a team?
Exactly.
100% in there. So embracing failure, playing hurt, I've learned, and I love it, to trust the struggle. Like the harder it gets, I get this feeling inside, oh my gosh, it's going to be so good when I come out the other side.
Yes, exactly.
Talk about
That's
that a little.
Great phrase. Yeah, trust the struggle, trust the process. It's hard. Things that are hard, I think ultimately are greatly worth it if you can stick with them. And there's obviously exceptions to that. But, I think what's hard right now, I think for folks is having the patience and the confidence and the humor to struggle. And, the speed of the world is so fast. You can just chat GPT something you used to, you or I 20, 30, 40 years ago we're struggling through stuff. Now you type in a prompt and it spits itself out for you. So I think the inclination to struggle, the tolerance of struggle has gotten very low. And I think that's very dangerous because struggle creates resilience. And if you are not resilient, you really, and I write a lot about this. If you aren't resilient, if you can't play hurt, you will never be great because you will yes, you might keep moving up, but then you will get to a point where you're deeply challenged and you will not have the struggle to learn from, because struggles yield all sorts of learnings, and they may not show themselves right away and they may not add up just so, but struggle is a huge way to build skill. And I wish people would flip their thinking on that.